Along the rivers and rail lines of Wisconsin, there are massive buildings that once roared with life. Paper mills. Factories that never slept. Machines thundered day and night, steam rose from towering stacks, and entire towns depended on the endless rhythm of pulp, water, and steel. Entire towns depended on the endless rhythm of pulp, water, and steel. But when the machines stopped, something else began. Windows shattered and were never repaired. Conveyor belts rusted in place. Water seeped into basements where accidents were quietly forgotten. At night, lights flicker inside buildings with no electricity. Footsteps echo across concrete floors coated in dust. And voices whisper from places where no one has worked for decades. Some paper mills were abandoned because they were no longer profitable. Others closed after disasters, deaths, and unexplained events that were never fully recorded. Locals say these mills were never meant to fall silent. They absorbed exhaustion, fear, and tragedy for generations. And now, they remember. Tonight, we explore the most haunted abandoned paper mills in Wisconsin, places where industry died, but something stayed behind. If you heard machinery start up inside an abandoned mill at midnight, would you step closer to investigate or would you run before the doors sealed shut behind you? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are somewhere safe and warm, because the places we are about to enter are cold, damp, and heavy with history. Wisconsin was once one of the great paper-producing regions of America. Rivers powered massive mills. Workers labored long hours amid deafening noise, toxic chemicals, and dangerous machinery. Accidents were common. Falls. Crushings. Exposure that slowly destroyed lungs and minds. Some workers vanished into the machinery and were never recovered. Others collapsed and were quietly replaced. When mills closed, they were often abandoned suddenly, leaving behind offices, lockers, control rooms, and memories that never faded. Visitors today report the same strange experiences. Sudden drops in temperature. The feeling of being watched from catwalks above. Phantom sounds of machines starting, stopping, and grinding. Some swear they hear whistles signaling shift changes that never come. Before we step through these rusted doors together, let me ask you something. If you were standing inside a dark, abandoned paper mill and heard a supervisor's voice calling you back to work, would you answer or would you remember that no one should be there at all? Take a slow breath. And let us descend into the top most haunted abandoned paper mills in Wisconsin. Black River Pulp Mill stands at the edge of a slow-moving river, its massive concrete walls rising from the water like a shadow given shape. The river runs dark and smooth beside it, reflecting the mill so clearly that it often appears doubled, as if the building continues beneath the surface. Even in daylight, the reflection feels heavier than it should, a dark mirror that never quite ripples away. The mill was once the heart of the region's industry. For decades, raw timber arrived by rail and barge. Transformed inside the building by roaring machines and constant motion. Conveyors rattled, grinders screamed, and presses thundered day and night. Workers described the sound as something you felt in your bones. A mechanical pulse that never truly stopped. When the mill finally closed, it was done carefully and officially. Power lines were disconnected. Control panels were locked. Switches were tagged and sealed. The last shift walked out knowing the machines would never run again. Silence was expected to follow. Visitors who enter the mill today often pause near the main floor, listening. From deep within the structure comes a familiar sound, low and steady, like machinery running far below. It is not loud. It does not rise or fall. It hums, accompanied by distant rhythmic vibrations that seem to travel through steel beams and concrete columns. Those who once worked there recognize it instantly. It sounds like the mill at full operation, muffled by distance and walls, as though someone has restarted the system in a sealed section of the building. Yet inspection confirms there is no power anywhere in the facility. The deeper visitors go, the clearer the sound becomes. Stairwells amplify it. At times, it feels as if the machinery is just one room away, always just beyond reach. Upper levels tell another story. Catwalks stretch across open spaces high above the main floor, narrow paths of rusted steel suspended between towering machines. Footsteps echo along these walkways, slow and deliberate. The sound is unmistakable, boots striking metal in a steady pattern. Visitors often freeze, certain someone else is exploring the mill. They call out. Their voices echo back unanswered. When they climb toward the catwalks, the footsteps move away, never speeding up, never stopping, always remaining just out of sight. Those who manage to reach the upper levels find empty walkways and undisturbed dust. No footprints appear. No movement lingers. Yet the moment they turn back, the footsteps resume behind them, circling the upper floors like a routine being followed. Security records from the years after closure document repeated reports of noise. Guards logged complaints of running equipment and unexplained movement. Inspections found no trespassers, no active systems, no signs of tampering. Over time, patrols were reduced, then eliminated entirely. Local residents say the mill never accepted closure. They speak of it as a place built for motion, designed to operate without rest. When activity ceased, the structure did not forget its purpose. The river beside it continued to move, slow and constant, reflecting the mill as it always had. Inside, the air feels thick and stale, carrying a faint metallic scent. Even without sound, the building seems tense, as if waiting for instructions. Pipes line the walls like veins. Valves remain frozen in positions they held for years. Visitors report moments when the machinery noise briefly grows louder, synchronized with their movement. When they stop walking, the sound steadies. When they move again, it shifts, matching their pace in an unsettling imitation. Some claim the footsteps above respond the same way. Faster movement below leads to quicker steps overhead. Slower movement brings measured pacing, heavy and patient, as though the unseen walker is aware of being followed. Historical accounts add context. The mill operated under intense pressure to meet quotas. Shifts ran long. Maintenance was constant. Workers memorized the sounds of the machines, using rhythm and pitch to detect problems before alarms sounded. The building became a language of noise and motion. In that environment, silence was rare and unwelcome. It signaled failure. When the mill shut down, the absence of sound may have been as unnatural to the structure as noise would be to a forest. Some believe the echoes are residual vibrations trapped in steel and concrete, released slowly over time. Others believe the repetition of labor left something deeper behind. Night intensifies the experience. Darkness removes visual certainty, leaving sound to dominate. Machinery hums feel closer. Footsteps echo longer. Shadows stretch across walls, cast by nothing that moves. A few visitors report seeing lights flicker briefly deep inside the mill. Reflections bouncing across wet floors or polished metal. These moments vanish quickly, leaving only darkness and the steady presence of sound. The mill does not feel aggressive. The footsteps do not chase. The machinery does not surge. Everything follows a pattern, a routine locked into repetition. By morning, the building appears inert again. Sunlight reveals rust, dust, and decay. The river flows quietly, reflecting the mill without comment. Visitors question what they heard, searching for rational explanations. Yet many leave with the same thought. The Black River pulp mill does not feel abandoned. It feels paused. Deep inside, unseen systems seem to turn without power. Upper catwalks carry footsteps with no owner. The river mirrors the structure endlessly, as if reminding it of what it once was. The mill stands beside the water, dark and silent on the surface, while inside it continues to work, following rhythms learned long ago, ensuring that even without electricity or people, the sound of labor never fully fades. Widowmaker Mill stands at the edge of a narrow river bend, its massive stone walls rising from ground darkened by decades of moisture and neglect. From a distance, the structure looks solid and complete. Tall windows line its upper floors. A heavy timber frame supports rusted metal beams that once carried constant motion. Yet even before stepping inside, visitors sense the tension that gave the mill its name. It was not an official title. Workers began calling it Widowmaker Mill after a series of fatal accidents spread through the local workforce. The machinery was powerful, the schedules unforgiving, and safety measures were minimal. Each incident was treated as unavoidable, an unfortunate cost of production. Over time, the name stuck, spoken quietly at first, then openly, until it replaced the mill's original identity entirely. During its operation, the mill never truly rested. Water roared beneath the floors, driving gears that turned day and night. Belts snapped into motion with sudden force. Workers slipped on wet stone. Clothing caught in moving parts. Signals were missed amid the noise. Several lives were lost over the years, each accident recorded briefly and followed by a return to work. The machines did not slow. Production did not pause. When the mill finally shut down, it did so without ceremony. Equipment was left in place. Tools remained where they were last set down. Chains hung slack from overhead supports. The river continued to flow beneath the building, feeding cold air upward through cracks and channels designed for ventilation. That cold never left. Visitors entering Widowmaker Mill immediately noticed the temperature change. Even on warm days, a sharp chill moves through the interior, stronger in rooms that stand completely empty. The air pours outward from dark corners and unused corridors, as if drawn from deeper underground. The sensation feels deliberate. Explorers describe walking from sunlit areas into rooms where breath becomes visible without warning. The cold gathers around the ankles and waist first, then rises slowly, settling against the chest and neck. Sound behaves strangely inside the mill. Footsteps echo too long. Small movements carry farther than expected. The river below creates a constant low presence, a steady pressure rather than a clear sound. Above it, the building creaks softly, responding to changes in temperature and wind. Some hear breathing. It begins faintly, easily mistaken for air moving through vents. A slow, uneven sound that seems close, just behind the listener. When explorers stop walking, the sound continues for a moment longer, then fades, as if adjusting to stillness. Those who turn around find nothing. The breathing often returns deeper inside the mill, in narrow corridors or near old machinery rooms where chains still hang from rusted mounts. The chains themselves are silent at first. Then comes the scrape. Metal sliding against metal, slow and deliberate, as if a heavy length is being pulled across stone or iron. The sound travels through the structure, difficult to locate, seeming to come from behind even when the space is empty. The scrape pauses, resumes, then pauses again, matching the pace of effort rather than movement. Explorers report a tightening sensation in the shoulders and chest while listening, as if their own breathing becomes heavier in response. The sound always stops abruptly. Not with a final clatter or release, but with sudden absence. Caretakers and historians offer explanations. Cold air moves through subterranean channels, shifting pressure. Old chains respond to vibration from the river below. Structural settling produces friction between aging components. Each explanation accounts for part of the experience, but none explain the timing. The breathing and scraping often occur together. They follow explorers rather than preceding them. The sounds seem aware of movement, rising when someone enters certain areas and fading when those areas are abandoned. Staircases turn sharply. Rooms open into larger spaces without warning. Machinery platforms sit above dark water channels, their edges difficult to judge in low light. The building feels layered, with multiple levels of history stacked vertically and horizontally. Those who spend longer inside report heightened tension. Not panic, but sustained alertness. Muscles remain tight. Attention narrows. Every sound feels significant. The cold deepens gradually, even when clothing remains dry and movement constant. Some believe the mill holds more than memory. They suggest the repeated accidents, the constant risk, and the normalization of loss created an environment shaped by strain rather than violence. A place where effort ended without relief, where work continued despite fear and exhaustion. The breathing reflects that effort. The scraping echoes labor without reward. Visitors who leave the mill describe immediate relief once outside. Warm air returns quickly. The sense of pressure lifts. Sounds regain normal distance and clarity. Looking back at the structure, it appears unchanged, inert, incapable of producing what was just experienced. Yet the name Widowmaker Mill persists. It is spoken carefully, with respect rather than dramatics. Locals do not linger near the building at night. They do not challenge those who choose to explore it, but they do not encourage them either. Inside, the cold continues to flow from empty rooms. The chains remain suspended, unmoving, waiting for forces that no longer exist. The river keeps turning beneath the floor, patient and indifferent. Sometimes, when someone walks too far into the quiet, labored breathing follows close behind, accompanied by the slow metallic scrape of chains. Stopping only when the listener leaves the space where the mill remembers what it once demanded. Ghost Shift Mill stands at the edge of a slow river, its brick walls darkened by age and soot. Tall windows line the structure, many of them clouded or broken, reflecting little during the day. Rusted pipes trace the exterior like veins, and the tall chimney rises above everything, no longer breathing smoke into the sky. The tall chimney rises above everything, no longer breathing smoke into the sky. By daylight, the mill feels empty and quiet, a monument to labor that has long since stopped. Decades ago, this mill was known for its overnight production. While other factories closed at dusk, Ghost Shift Mill came alive. Machines thundered through the night. Conveyors rattled. Gears turned without pause. The night shift was its heartbeat, a steady rhythm of whistles, bells, and footsteps echoing through long corridors. When operations finally ceased, the shutdown was sudden. Equipment was powered down. Workers cleared their lockers. The gates were closed and never reopened. Silence settled over the building, and for a time, it seemed complete. Then the lights began to flicker. It happens only after sunset. As the sky darkens and shadows stretch across the riverbank, faint glows appear behind the mill windows. Not every window. Just a few at first, scattered across different floors. The light is dim and uneven, pulsing softly as if struggling to stay on. Those who notice it often assume electrical faults or reflections from passing cars. But the mill has no active power. Lines were disconnected years ago. Inspectors confirmed this more than once. Still, the lights return. They flicker in patterns that feel deliberate. One floor brightens briefly, then fades. Another follows moments later. The sequence moves through the building, room by room, never all at once. It resembles activity rather than malfunction, as if someone is walking through the mill, turning lights on and off as they go. Night guards were the first to hear the sounds. A sharp whistle cuts through the quiet, echoing across the river and into nearby streets. Moments later, a bell rings inside the building, its tone dulled by distance and brick but still recognizable. Then comes movement. Footsteps travel along the upper floors, steady and purposeful. Voices follow, low and indistinct, carrying the cadence of conversation without distinct words. The sound moves through empty halls, around corners, up stairwells, just as it would have when the mill was full. Those listening often report a strange familiarity in the noise. The rhythm feels practiced. There is no panic, no confusion. Everything sounds routine. The shift has started. Visitors who enter the mill during the day find nothing unusual beyond decay. Dust coats the machinery. Belts hang slack. Control panels sit dark and lifeless. The air smells of oil and damp brick. At night, the experience changes completely. The first bell rings shortly after full darkness. It resonates through the structure, vibrating faintly in the walls. Voices begin soon after. They move through the mill in waves, rising and falling, growing closer, then receding. The voices do not shout. They do not whisper. They speak at working volume, as if surrounded by noise that is no longer there. Laughter appears briefly, then disappears. A call echoes down a hallway, answered from somewhere deeper inside. No words can be clearly understood. Attempts to follow the sounds lead nowhere. By the time a corridor is reached, the voices have moved on, slipping into another part of the building. Staircases creak under careful steps, but when lights are shined upward, nothing is there. The mill seems to organize itself around the sounds. Doors that were jammed shift slightly. Loose metal hums in response to unseen vibration. Dust lifts from the floor in thin clouds, disturbed by movement that leaves no mark. At regular intervals, the bell rings again. This time it signals a break. The voices soften. Footsteps slow. Some sounds gather in areas that once held lockers and break rooms. There is a sense of pause, of routine briefly interrupted. Then another whistle cuts through the building, and the noise resumes, energized, focused. Those who have stayed long enough describe an unsettling detail. The voices never acknowledge outsiders. They do not react to flashlights, footsteps, or spoken words. It is as though the mill exists in a separate moment, replaying a process without awareness of the present. Near dawn, the sounds begin to fade. The voices thin out, drifting farther apart. Footsteps slow, then stop. One final bell rings, longer than the others, signaling the end of the shift. Lights flicker once more behind the windows, then go dark. By morning, the mill returns to silence. No footprints in dust. No warmth in the machinery. The building stands exactly as it did before nightfall, inert and abandoned. Records show that the mill once employed hundreds, many of whom worked nights for years. They followed strict schedules, marked by whistles and bells, bound to routines that did not change. Some spent more waking hours inside the mill than anywhere else. Locals say the building remembers that. They believe the overnight shift never truly ended. That the mill, built for constant motion, continues its work in the only way it can. Sound, light, and movement replayed without bodies, without machines, held together by habit alone. Investigators have found no rational source for the phenomena. No hidden generators. No sound equipment. No signs of trespass. The structure should be incapable of producing what it does. Yet night after night, Ghost Shift Mill resumes its schedule. Lights flicker on in empty rooms. Whistles pierce the dark. Bells mark time. Voices move through halls that have not heard living workers in years. Those who witness it often describe a strange sense of respect rather than fear. As dawn approaches and the final bell fades, the river flows on unchanged. The mill stands quiet once more, brick and steel resting in the daylight. But when the sun sets again, and shadows gather along the water, Ghost Shift Mill prepares for another night of production. Keeping time in sound and light. Carrying out a shift that never truly ended. Bleach Tower Mill rises from the surrounding grounds like a thin spine of stone and steel, taller than it appears from a distance and far narrower than seems practical. Its walls climb straight upward with little variation, windows stacked in vertical lines that catch light unevenly. Even before stepping inside, visitors notice something unusual in the air. There is a faint chemical smell that never fully disappears. It is not sharp or overwhelming. It lingers gently, carried on still air, noticeable only after a moment of attention. Some describe it as clean. Others call it sterile. The scent clings to the structure itself, present on calm days and windy ones alike, unaffected by weather or season. Bleach Tower Mill earned its name from its original purpose. Decades ago, the tower was used in industrial processing that required height and gravity rather than complex machinery. Materials were lifted to upper platforms and allowed to move downward through controlled stages. Chemicals were involved, carefully measured and contained according to standards of the time. Workers moved up and down the tower constantly, monitoring flow, adjusting valves, and watching for imbalance. Records show that the mill operated without major incident for many years. Then reports began to surface of unexplained discomfort. Workers complained of burning sensations on their skin, mild at first, then persistent. Inspections found no leaks. Protective equipment was deemed adequate. Operations continued. Inspections found no leaks. Others felt heat on their arms and necks while standing on certain platforms, even when surfaces were cool to the touch. No visible injuries were recorded. The sensations left no marks. Eventually, the mill was shut down, its closure attributed to changing industrial needs rather than any single event. Bleach Tower Mill was left standing. Years later, when access was granted for study and preservation, the same reports returned. Visitors stepping inside noticed the smell immediately. Within minutes, some felt tingling on exposed skin. A warmth that did not come from temperature. The sensation moved slowly, drifting from one area to another without pattern. Those who experienced it often rubbed their arms or checked their hands, expecting to see redness. There was none. The interior of the tower amplifies every sound. Footsteps echo upward and downward simultaneously. Voices rise into the narrow shaft and return softened, distorted. Visitors looking upward report silhouettes standing on platforms far above the floor. Dark shapes positioned where workers once stood. They do not move. They do not lean or gesture. They simply remain, framed by railings and beams, indistinct but unmistakably upright. The figures vanish when approached. Climbing the stairs brings no confirmation. The platforms are empty. The platforms are empty. Dust lies undisturbed. Railings are cold and bare. Looking back up, the floor below seems farther away than before, the height exaggerated by the tower's narrow design. Those who return their gaze upward often see the silhouettes again, now positioned elsewhere, higher or lower than before. Always distant. Always just beyond reach. Maintenance crews familiar with the tower acknowledge the sightings quietly. They note that light and shadow behave unpredictably in vertical spaces. The human eye struggles with depth when looking straight up. Shapes can appear where none exist. Yet even they avoid lingering beneath certain platforms. The burning sensation on the skin tends to intensify in specific zones. Standing still, visitors feel it rise and fall like a passing current. It does not follow airflow. It does not correspond to visible features. Instruments detect nothing unusual. The sensation exists only to those present. Some describe it as pressure rather than heat. Others say it feels like exposure without contact. No two accounts are identical, yet all agree the feeling is localized and real. Historians examining Bleach Tower Mill note that its design forced workers into close proximity with materials and processes for extended periods. Height increased efficiency but also isolation. Those on upper platforms worked alone, separated by distance and noise. A delay above affected everything below. Workers learned to watch carefully, to stand still and observe flow, to sense changes before they became visible. Over time, this attention became habitual, ingrained. Perhaps the tower learned it as well. Visitors often report the feeling of being observed from above. Not watched with intent, but monitored, as if their presence is being measured against expectations. The sensation grows stronger when standing still and weakens when moving. A dark shape slides along a railing though the sun remains fixed. A silhouette seems to turn slightly, then freeze. The smell never changes. Despite cleaning, sealing, and restoration, the faint chemical scent remains embedded in the structure. Some believe it is a residue absorbed over decades. Others note that it grows more noticeable when the tower is quiet, as if sound usually distracts from it. Those who stay inside the mill for extended periods report fatigue and heightened awareness. Thoughts sharpen, then scatter. Time feels uneven. Minutes stretch. Small sounds feel significant. The vertical space presses inward, emphasizing height and depth simultaneously. Leaving the tower brings immediate relief. The smell fades quickly in open air. The skin sensation disappears without trace. Looking back, the structure appears unchanged, narrow and still, its windows dark. There is no sign of movement on the platforms. Yet the memory lingers. People describe dreams of standing high above a floor they cannot see. Of watching without being seen. Of feeling warmth rise and fall without source. The dreams fade, but the impression remains. Bleach Tower Mill continues to stand, preserved and monitored, its purpose long ended. It no longer processes materials. It no longer requires attention. And yet, those who enter sense that the tower has not forgotten its role. Figures remain visible in shadow. Sensations rise without cause. The air carries a memory of what once passed through these narrow walls. Bleach Tower Mill does not announce itself. It waits. Tall and narrow, it holds its history vertically, stacked layer upon layer. Inviting those who step inside to feel what cannot be measured, and to notice what still stands quietly above. Watching from the platforms where work once never stopped. Lost Time Mill stands beside a slow river where water bends around stone foundations worn smooth by age. The building rises in uneven layers, timber and brick joined through generations of repair. Moss fills the seams. Windows reflect the water more than the sky. From the outside, it appears abandoned but intact, a place paused between use and forgetting. Inside, the first thing visitors notice is the clocks. They hang on walls, sit on shelves, and rest above doorways, each one stopped at a different hour. Some show early morning. Others mark late afternoon or deep night. None agree. Dust coats their faces, but the hands are fixed firmly, not broken or loose. They appear to have stopped with intention. The mill once operated around strict schedules. Grain arrived at dawn. Wheels turned by mid-morning. Work paused and resumed according to bells and timepieces placed throughout the building. When the mill closed, the clocks were left behind, expected to wind down naturally. They did not. Records show they stopped suddenly, each at a separate moment, without pattern or explanation. Attempts to restart them failed. New mechanisms worked briefly, then stalled. Eventually, the clocks were accepted as part of the structure, silent markers of a time that no longer moved forward. The air is cool and still. Light carries gently, footsteps echoing with a hollow patience. The river and walls hold it apart from passing hours. At first, it feels slower. Movements stretch. Thoughts wander. Visitors find themselves lingering in rooms without clear reason, studying gears, beams, and old tools. Curiosity replaces urgency. There is no sense of being late or early, only present. Clocks draw attention without demand. Each one offers a different suggestion of when it stopped, inviting comparison without resolution. Looking from one to another creates mild confusion, easily dismissed at first. The mind searches for reference and finds none. After some time, awareness begins to soften. Visitors report difficulty recalling when they entered. The sequence of rooms blurs. The sound of the river fades and returns without clear rhythm. Light through the windows seems unchanged, as though the sun has paused overhead. Conversation inside the mill often drifts into quiet reflection. Words feel less necessary. Pauses lengthen between thoughts. There is no pressure to fill silence. The space encourages stillness. Those who explore deeper levels notice the effect more strongly. Stairways descend into areas where machinery once turned constantly. Here, the air feels heavier. Sound dulls further. The sense of time passing becomes abstract, replaced by the act of observation itself. Visitors often check their watches or phones, only to find them working normally. The reassurance lasts briefly. The sense of disconnection returns almost immediately, as if personal devices cannot anchor time within these walls. Some describe moments of complete absorption. Standing before a wheel or a stopped clock, they lose awareness of surroundings. Thought narrows to detail. The sensation resembles deep focus, but without effort. Eventually, visitors leave the mill, often surprised by the transition. Stepping outside restores sound and motion abruptly. The river feels louder. Wind moves more clearly. The sky appears shifted. The sky appears shifted. This is when the difference becomes apparent. Those who believe they spent minutes inside discover that hours have passed. Shadows have moved significantly. Light has changed angle. In some cases, daylight has faded into evening. Watches confirm it. Phones record the gap. The realization brings confusion rather than fear. Others experience the opposite. They believe they were inside for a long time, only to find that little time has passed. The inconsistency varies, but the effect remains consistent. Time inside does not match time outside. No physical harm is reported. Visitors do not collapse or lose memory entirely. The change is contained within perception and duration. The mill releases people without resistance. Historical accounts suggest this effect was noticed even during operation. Workers described days that felt unusually short or long without clear cause. Productivity fluctuated. Fatigue appeared at unexpected times. These reports were attributed to routine factors and never formally investigated. When the mill closed, the effect became more noticeable. Without schedules or bells to impose structure, the building seemed free to settle into its own rhythm. One disconnected from the river's steady flow. The stopped clocks serve as reminders rather than causes. Each marks a moment when motion ceased, but not the same moment. Some visitors speculate that the mill holds layers of time simultaneously, each room aligned with a different moment. Others believe the building encourages a mental state that alters perception, amplifying focus until duration loses meaning. Whatever the explanation, the experience is consistent enough to draw attention and subtle enough to resist proof. No measurement taken inside has captured the effect fully. Devices work. Clocks tick when brought in, then fail when left behind. The mill remains open to the river and the sky, yet closed to ordinary progression. It does not trap or deceive. It simply alters experience by removing familiar markers. Those who leave often carry the sensation with them. For hours afterward, time feels slightly unstable. Minutes stretch or compress. The effect fades gradually, replaced by routine and reference. Lost Time Mill does not announce its nature. It does not warn or invite. It stands quietly beside the river, holding stopped hours on its walls, and offering visitors a rare experience. Inside, time does not rush or demand. It loosens its grip, allowing moments to drift without measure. Outside, clocks resume their authority. The mill remains, not broken, not active, but suspended, a place where time learned to pause unevenly, and never fully began again. Riverside Grinder Mill stands at the edge of a slow and steady river, its wide concrete frame leaning slightly toward the water as if listening to its flow. During the day, the structure appears dormant, rusted machinery frozen in place, windows shattered and doors hanging open. The river reflects fragments of the mill in broken lines, distorted by current and shadow. At night, the mill becomes something else entirely. The building was once a critical part of local industry. Raw materials arrived by barge and rail, fed into massive grinding machines that reduced metal and stone into usable forms. The work was loud and relentless. Grinding wheels screamed against steel. Floors trembled under constant pressure. The mill operated around the clock, its noise echoing across the river and into nearby neighborhoods. When operations ended, the shutdown was sudden. Equipment was powered down and abandoned where it stood. Some machines were dismantled, others left intact but silent. Over time, nature reclaimed the grounds. Water seeped through cracked foundations. The mill was left to decay beside the river it once depended on. Silence was expected to follow. Instead, visitors who approached the mill after dark report hearing grinding metal echoing through the structure. The sound is deep and rough, unmistakable in tone. It carries the same harsh rhythm the machines once produced, though muted and distant, as if heard through layers of concrete and memory. The grinding does not come from a single point. It shifts within the building, traveling through corridors and open bays. Sometimes it feels close enough to touch. Other times it seems buried deep beneath the floor. Those who pause to listen often feel vibrations beneath their feet, subtle but persistent, like the mill is waking up piece by piece. The vibrations are not constant. They rise and fall, matching the imagined cycle of machinery engaging and releasing. Visitors describe the sensation as standing on a living surface, one that responds to presence rather than weight. The sensation is not constant. It rises and falls, matching the imagined cycle of machinery engaging and releasing. Those who pause to listen often feel vibrations beneath their feet, subtle but persistent, like the mill is waking up piece by piece. As eyes adjust to darkness, movement becomes harder to ignore. Dark shapes slip behind broken machines and fallen panels. They move low and fast, hugging shadows where light barely reaches. When visitors shift position or step closer, the shapes retreat, always moving just far enough to remain hidden. No sound accompanies their movement. No footsteps. No breath. Only the continued grinding echo that fills the space, uninterrupted by the presence of these figures. Those who explore deeper into the mill report a growing sense of being guided rather than chased. Paths open through debris. Shadows draw attention towards certain areas, then recede. When approached directly, the shapes withdraw into narrower gaps, disappearing behind machinery too small to conceal anything solid. Security records from years past document complaints of unexplained noise and structural vibration. Inspectors found no active equipment and no geological explanation for the movement. Over time, visits became less frequent. The mill was deemed unsafe and left alone. Local residents have their own explanations. They say the mill never forgot its purpose. That the constant pressure of grinding left something embedded in the walls and floors. According to them, the building remembers the force and motion that shaped it. Replaying those moments when the world grows quiet enough to notice. At night, the river adds to the effect. Its slow current reflects distorted light into the mill, causing shadows to stretch and fold. The movement of water mirrors the rhythm of the grinding sound, reinforcing the illusion that the machines are still turning somewhere below. Some visitors describe moments when the grinding grows louder as they move forward, then quieter when they stop. Others claim the vibrations align with their heartbeat, creating a disorienting overlap between body and building. Despite the unease, the mill does not feel hostile. The shapes never approach openly. The sounds never escalate into chaos. Everything follows a controlled pattern, as though governed by an old routine that no longer requires human oversight. Those who linger too long report fatigue that feels out of proportion to their effort. Muscles ache. Thoughts slow. The sensation resembles standing near heavy machinery for extended periods, even though nothing visible is operating. A few visitors attempt to document their experiences. Recordings capture faint grinding noises and low-frequency hums, but never the full intensity heard in person. Cameras catch shifting shadows but nothing clearly defined. Each attempt seems to miss the core of the experience by moments. By dawn, Riverside Grinder Mill returns to stillness. Sunlight reveals dust and corrosion. Floors lie unmoving. The river flows quietly, indifferent to what passed through the night. Visitors step away questioning what they felt, replaying sounds in their minds long after they leave. Yet many agree on one thing. The mill does not feel empty. It feels occupied by motion rather than presence. By force rather than form. The grinding sound, the vibrations, the retreating shapes all suggest something continuing its work without direction or end. Riverside Grinder Mill remains beside the water, decaying but active in ways that defy easy explanation. At night, metal grinds where no power flows. Floors tremble under invisible weight. Shadows move with intention, then vanish. The river carries the echoes downstream, smoothing their edges but never erasing them. And within the mill, the work goes on, unseen and unheard by most, ensuring that the place never truly rests, even in silence. Broken Press Mill sits low against the riverbank, its long brick walls stained dark by age, moisture, and neglect. The building was designed around one purpose: power. Inside its central hall stands the press that once defined the mill's output and its reputation. A towering structure of steel plates and pistons, bolted directly into the floor, built to apply force with absolute certainty. When it was active, the press shaped metal for miles around, its rhythm setting the pace of every shift. Workers respected it, but they also feared it. The press operated with little margin for error. Signals had to be clear. Timing had to be exact. During busy seasons, production demands pushed crews to move faster than caution allowed. On the day of the accident, that balance failed. Records describe a mechanical fault followed by a delayed shutdown. Several workers were caught in the machine's cycle before power could be cut. The incident ended the mill's operation permanently. Investigations followed, then silence. The press was left where it stood, too large to remove, too costly to dismantle. The press remained. Visitors entering Broken Press Mill noticed the change in air almost immediately. The temperature does not drop sharply, but the atmosphere feels heavier near the central hall. Breathing becomes shallow without effort, as if the space resists inhalation. Sound dulls slightly, absorbed by thick walls and rusted surfaces. Its steel plates are frozen mid-position, locked by corrosion. Rust spreads outward in dark patterns, marking joints and seams like scars. The machine no longer moves, yet it holds attention, drawing focus the way a deep pit demands careful footing. Standing near it creates unease. Explorers describe the sensation as pressure rather than fear. A subtle weight pressing against the chest and temples. The longer they remain, the more pronounced it becomes. Some step away instinctively, surprised by how quickly relief follows distance. Then there are the sounds. At first, they are barely noticeable. A low vibration, easily mistaken for wind passing through broken windows or water shifting beneath the floor. As visitors move closer to the press, the sound changes texture. Soft, irregular noises seem to emerge from within the steel itself. Not loud enough to identify clearly. Not constant. Brief pulses that resemble voices filtered through heavy material, struggling to pass through layers of metal and time. Those who stop and listen report hearing cries without words. The sound lacks clarity, stripped of detail, reduced to urgency and strain. It fades quickly when attention shifts, returning only when the listener stands still near the press. The effect is deeply unsettling. There is no direction to the sound. It does not echo around the room. It feels contained, trapped inside the machine's structure, pressing outward without release. Caretakers and historians caution against reading too much into it. They explain that large metal structures can resonate in unusual ways. Temperature differences cause steel to expand and contract. Water beneath the building can create low-frequency vibrations that interact with hollow spaces inside machinery. These explanations account for some of the sensations. They do not explain why the sounds are reported only near the press. They do not explain why multiple visitors describe similar impressions, even without knowing the mill's history beforehand. The press room has no natural airflow. Doors and windows remain fixed open, yet the air does not circulate easily. Dust hangs in place. Moisture clings to surfaces. The heaviness seems localized, as if the space around the machine retains something denser than air alone. Those who venture deeper into the mill find other areas relatively calm. Smaller rooms feel ordinary. Corridors echo predictably. It is only when returning to the central hall that the atmosphere tightens again, pulling attention back to the press. Some explorers feel compelled to circle it. They move slowly, tracing its outline, noting details of bolts and seams. The sound sometimes follows, shifting subtly, staying just below recognition. When they step back, the noise recedes. The press does not threaten movement. It does not activate. It does not respond visibly. Its presence is passive, immovable, yet overwhelming in a way that feels intentional rather than random. The mill's closure did not erase what happened. For years afterward, locals avoided the building. They spoke of it as a place that still worked, even in silence. A machine that never finished its last task. Visitors who stay too long near the press describe lingering effects. Breathing feels tight even after leaving the room. Sound seemed distant for a few minutes longer than expected. The body carries the memory of pressure, as if muscles forgot how to relax. Once outside, the river air clears the sensation quickly. The mill looks inert again. Brick walls. Broken windows. A quiet structure reclaimed by vines and rust. It becomes easier to dismiss what was felt inside as imagination shaped by history. Yet those who return report the same thing every time. The thick air. The muffled cries that never fully form. The sense that something remains contained within the rusted steel, not reaching outward in anger or warning, but existing in a suspended state, locked between motion and stillness. Rain falls through its roof. The press remains frozen, its immense force trapped mid-cycle, unfinished. And inside that silent hall, where steel once moved with relentless certainty, the air still presses inward, and faint sounds continue to emerge from within the machine, reminding anyone who listens too closely that some moments do not end when the power is cut. North Cellulose Mill sits at the far edge of an industrial corridor where the road narrows and the air changes. The building is massive, low and sprawling, its concrete walls stained by decades of moisture and chemical runoff. Tall stacks rise above the roofline, silent and hollow. From a distance, the mill looks abandoned in an ordinary way. Up close, something feels missing. The quiet is the first thing people notice. It is not the peaceful quiet of an empty place, nor the distant hum of machinery long shut down. It is a deep absence of sound, as though noise itself avoids the area. Wind passes through nearby fields but does not seem to cross the mill grounds. Leaves do not rustle. Insects do not buzz. Most unsettling of all, birds do not land here. Trees near the perimeter remain empty, their branches bare even during migration seasons. Flocks pass overhead and veer away without circling. No nests cling to the structures. The air above the mill remains clear and unused, as if marked by an invisible boundary. Former workers once described North Cellulose Mill as loud beyond endurance. Pulp grinders roared day and night. Conveyors rattled endlessly. Communication required shouting, hand signals, practiced routines. When production stopped, locals expected the noise to fade into normal silence. Instead, the silence hardened. Visitors approaching the main entrance often slow their pace without realizing why. Inside, the mill stretches into long corridors lined with rusted equipment and peeling paint. Light filters through high windows coated in grime, casting pale rectangles across the floor. The air smells faintly of damp paper and old chemicals, a scent that lingers without growing stronger or weaker. For several minutes, nothing happens. Then the whispers begin. They arrive quietly, just below the threshold of certainty. A breath of sound brushing past the ear. A syllable that feels almost familiar. Visitors pause, turning their heads, expecting to see someone just out of sight. The corridors remain empty. As people move deeper into the mill, the whispers follow. They do not come from a single direction. They drift from behind, from beside, from ahead, always close enough to suggest presence. The voices never rise. They never shout. They remain intimate, restrained, as though not meant to be heard clearly. What makes them unsettling is their content. The whispers repeat unfinished sentences. A phrase begins, then stops. A thought forms halfway, then breaks off. Words trail into silence, leaving meaning incomplete. Listeners often feel compelled to complete the sentences themselves. This impulse brings discomfort, a sense of intrusion, as if the mill is testing attention rather than offering communication. Different visitors report different phrases, but the pattern remains the same. No whisper ever resolves. No sentence finishes. The voices move as people move. Stop, and the whispers hover. Walk faster, and they keep pace. Turn a corner, and the sound arrives moments later, slightly delayed, as though adjusting to the change. Attempts to record the whispers usually fail. Playback reveals only static, distant echoes, or nothing at all. In person, the sound feels precise and immediate. Those who stay longer begin to notice subtle changes in the building itself. Hallways seem longer than expected. Familiar rooms feel slightly altered on return. A doorway passed moments ago appears farther away when approached again. The mill does not rearrange itself visibly, but perception bends just enough to unsettle orientation. Former employees who have revisited the site describe a deeper reaction. Some recognize fragments of phrases that resemble conversations from years past. Instructions left hanging. Warnings never finished. Casual remarks cut short by machinery or time. No one hears full names. No one hears complete instructions. Only the moment before interruption. Local historians note that the mill operated under constant pressure. Production quotas were strict. Downtime was costly. Shifts overlapped chaotically. Conversations were often broken by alarms, malfunctions, sudden demands. Workers learned to communicate in fragments. When the mill closed, operations ceased abruptly. Equipment was shut down in stages. Teams were reassigned or dismissed. Many left without ceremony, conversations unfinished, routines disrupted. Some believe the building absorbed that pattern. The silence outside, the absence of birds, the quiet corridors inside, all seem to create a vacuum where sound behaves differently. Whispers linger because they were never meant to linger. They were meant to be drowned out. Visitors often report a growing sense of being accompanied. Not watched, but followed. The whispers do not feel hostile. They feel incomplete, restless, searching for continuation that never arrives. In certain sections of the mill, the whispers intensify briefly. Near old control rooms. Along stairwells between floors. Beside offices where paperwork still lies scattered, frozen in time. In these areas, the voices overlap slightly, multiple unfinished thoughts brushing against one another before separating again. Despite the discomfort, panic is rare. The mill does not threaten. It does not rush. It maintains its quiet control, guiding movement through sound rather than force. Most visitors leave after a short time, drained more by the mental effort of listening than by fear. Outside, sound returns abruptly. Wind moves again. Insects hum. Distant birds can be heard beyond the boundary of the grounds. Looking back, the mill appears unchanged. Solid. Inert. Silent. Yet many leave with a lingering sensation that something followed them to the edge. A half-formed thought that fades only after time and distance restore normal rhythm. North Cellulose Mill remains abandoned, fenced off and monitored occasionally, but rarely entered. Locals avoid lingering nearby. Not because of danger, but because of the silence. They say the mill is still full. Not of machines or workers, but of moments that never reached their end. Conversations cut short. Warnings left unsaid. Ideas never completed. Inside its empty halls, the whispers continue to move, repeating what was interrupted, waiting for someone to listen closely enough to understand that some places do not forget what was left unfinished. Wet Floor Mill sits low against the riverbank, its foundations pressed into ground that never fully dries. The mill was flooded again and again during its years of operation. Seasonal surges overwhelmed the banks. Storm runoff pushed water through doors and lower windows. Each time, workers pumped the floors dry, scraped away silt, and resumed their routines. Machinery was raised, platforms reinforced, drains widened. The floods became too frequent. Records show repeated closures, mounting repairs, and growing concern for safety. The final flood arrived quietly, without dramatic collapse. When it receded, the mill did not reopen. Tools were left behind. Paperwork remained on desks. The building was abandoned to the river it could never escape. Inside, the smell is immediate. Rotting wood. Stagnant water. Mineral dampness clinging to stone. The scent settles in the lungs and does not leave easily. Floors remain slick in places, coated with a fine layer of wet dust that never fully dries. Visitors tread carefully here. Every step leaves a mark. Footprints appear clearly in the damp dust, crisp outlines of shoes and boots that linger longer than expected. The impressions fade slowly, edges softening before disappearing altogether. This alone is not unusual. What unsettles people is when new footprints appear. Visitors stop walking and stand still, watching the floor. Moments later, fresh impressions form nearby. Bare outlines, smaller than expected, sometimes angled toward walls or doorways. They remain only briefly before dissolving back into formless moisture. Those who witness this often assume water is dripping from above. They check ceilings and beams. Nothing moves. No drops fall. The footprints do not lead anywhere recognizable. They simply appear, then vanish, leaving the floor unchanged. The mill grows colder as light fades. Even in warm weather, the interior temperature drops sharply after sunset. Damp air settles near the floor, pooling around ankles. In the dark, the feeling intensifies. Some report the sensation of something brushing against their ankles. Light contact. Brief and unmistakable. Like fingers passing through water. The touch never grips. It never pulls. It simply passes by, leaving behind a sudden spike of awareness and unease. People instinctively lift their feet or step backward. Flashlights sweep the floor, illuminating puddles and debris. Nothing moves. The water remains still. Yet the sensation returns for some, always low, always near the ground, as if confined to the level where water once stood deepest. Maintenance teams who have entered the mill describe similar experiences. They speak of feeling surrounded by motion without seeing it. Of standing in silence while something seems to pass behind their legs. Of hearing faint splashes where no water is disturbed. These accounts are shared quietly, often only after trust is established. The lower levels of wet floor mill are the most affected. Stairs descending into the basement are partially submerged year-round. The water there is dark and opaque, carrying a faint surface sheen. Debris floats just beneath the surface, drifting slowly despite the absence of current. The smell is strongest here, heavy and unavoidable. No one lingers long. Historical accounts suggest that during floods, workers were often stationed in these lower levels, monitoring water levels and protecting equipment. They worked in poor light, surrounded by rising water, their boots submerged for hours. Communication with upper floors was limited, and evacuation orders came late. The mill required constant vigilance. Water was always present, always threatening. Attention focused downward, toward the floor, toward the level where danger crept in silently. Visitors today often report a sense of being watched from below. Not seen, but sensed. Awareness rising from the floor rather than the walls. The feeling grows stronger when standing still, weaker when moving. Some describe the urge to lift their feet, as if remaining in one place invites attention. At night, the mill becomes especially disorienting. Sound behaves strangely in the damp air. Drips echo without source. Footsteps seem to repeat themselves, delayed and softened. Reflections shimmer across wet surfaces, suggesting movement that disappears when focused on directly. Those who walk through the mill in darkness feel exposed. The ceiling feels distant. The floor feels too close. The space between seems filled with unseen motion. The cold at ankle level persists, even when the rest of the body adjusts. Leaving the building brings immediate relief. The smell fades. The cold releases its grip. Looking back, the mill appears inert, slumped and silent against the river. No movement shows in the windows. No sound follows. Yet the memory remains vivid. Visitors recall the footprints forming without cause. The sensation of contact where nothing was visible. The constant awareness of the floor beneath them. These impressions linger longer than expected, resurfacing in dreams of shallow water and endless dampness. Wet floor mill continues to stand where water and land meet. Floods no longer force its doors open, but moisture still claims the interior inch by inch. The floor remains wet. The dust remains ready to record movement. And those who enter learn quickly to watch where they step. Because in this mill, the ground remembers. It remembers weight. It remembers motion. And in the dark, when the water seems closest, it reaches out just enough to be felt. Reminding visitors that some places never truly dry, and never truly empty. Red Light Mill stands at the edge of a slow bend in the river, its brick walls darkened by age and moisture. The structure is larger than it first appears, with multiple wings added over decades of expansion. Tall windows line each floor, many of them clouded with grime, reflecting the water and sky in dull shades. During the day, the mill feels empty but stable. Sunlight filters through broken panes and open doors, revealing the interior. Nothing moves. Nothing glows. The building seems finished with its past. Night changes that impression. As darkness settles, faint red light begins to appear inside the mill. It is not sudden or bright. It glows softly, just enough to be noticed through windows and doorways. The color is unmistakable, the dull red of emergency lighting, subdued and persistent. The mill no longer has power. Wiring was removed years ago. Panels were stripped. No generators remain. There is no known source for the light. Witnesses describe the glow appearing in different parts of the building on different nights. Sometimes it fills a single room on the ground floor. Other times it hovers in upper levels, faintly illuminating machinery silhouettes and stair rails. Over the course of hours, it shifts. The glow fades in one room and gradually appears in another, moving deeper into the mill or climbing slowly upward. The transition is smooth and deliberate. There is no sudden jump, no break in sequence. The light behaves as if it is traveling, room by room, following paths that once carried workers through the building. Those who remain inside after dark become aware of the movement without always seeing it directly. A corridor that was dark moments ago begins to glow faintly at the far end. Turning a corner reveals the red wash spilling across the floor. When approached, the light does not retreat, but it does not welcome either. It simply exists, occupying space. As soon as the red light appears, visitors report a powerful sensation of being watched. The feeling is immediate and difficult to ignore. It does not come from sound or motion. It arrives as awareness, a certainty that attention is focused directly on them. The sensation does not feel hostile, but it is intense, narrowing thought and heightening perception. People describe the instinct to turn slowly, expecting to see someone nearby. No one is ever found. The rooms remain empty, the machinery silent, the walls unmoving. Yet the sensation remains as long as the red light is present. Movement inside the mill becomes deliberate under its glow. Footsteps feel louder. Breathing feels more noticeable. The body reacts as if under observation, even without evidence. Some report adjusting posture unconsciously, standing straighter, moving more carefully. The red light casts long shadows that do not always align with the structure. Beams stretch across floors at odd angles. Machinery appears distorted, its shape softened and elongated. The environment feels altered, less solid, as if the light changes not just visibility but space itself. Attempts to document the phenomenon rarely succeed. Cameras capture dim red illumination but fail to record movement between rooms. Video often shows the light present in one location, then absent in the next frame without transition. Audio remains unchanged, offering no explanation. Those who follow the light deeper into the mill report stronger sensations. The feeling of being watched intensifies, pressing against the senses. Some experience mild dizziness or disorientation, as though depth and distance are harder to judge. Others feel compelled to stop moving altogether, standing still until the light passes. The mill's history adds a layer of context that deepens the unease. Emergency lighting was installed after a series of incidents involving machinery and power loss. Red lights marked safe routes and exits during shutdowns, guiding workers through smoke and darkness. Accidents became part of the mill's routine. Logs note injuries, close calls, and sudden evacuations. Emergency drills were frequent. Red lights were tested often, their glow becoming associated with urgency and heightened awareness. When the mill finally closed, operations ended abruptly. Equipment was shut down. Workers cleared out quickly. Some emergency systems remained active for a short time, then failed. The red lights were expected to go dark forever. They did not. Those who see the glow describe it as purposeful rather than random. It does not fill rooms indiscriminately. It appears where people once moved during emergencies, where attention mattered most. This is where the mill's former operation still echoes. The sensation of being watched does not follow visitors outside. Leaving the mill breaks the effect immediately. The red glow remains inside, contained by brick and shadow. Once beyond the walls, the night feels ordinary again, sounds returning, awareness relaxing. From the riverbank, the mill appears quiet. Windows occasionally pulse with faint red light, then go dark. The movement is slow enough to be missed if not observed carefully. To passing eyes, it could be mistaken for reflection or distant signal. Those who have witnessed it know better. Red light mill does not chase or call out. It does not trap those who enter. It simply illuminates itself in a way that demands attention, recreating the conditions of alertness without the danger that once required it. The feeling of being watched follows the same logic, focused and calm, without emotion. By morning, the mill returns to stillness. No red remains. Sunlight exposes dust and decay, erasing any sign of the night before. Visitors who return in daylight find nothing unusual. Yet the memory persists. Those who have stood beneath the red glow remember. The certainty of attention, the sense that the building itself was aware of them. Red light mill remains a place where emergency never fully ended. Where warning illumination still walks the halls, watching, waiting. Long after the reason for it disappeared. Where warning illumination still walks the halls, watching, waiting. Paperweight mill sits beside a narrow bend in the river, its brick exterior darkened by decades of moisture and neglect. Tall windows line the upper floors, many of them cracked or clouded, allowing only muted light to pass inside. From the outside, the building looks frozen in time, as though work simply paused one day and never resumed. Inside, the mill tells a quieter story. Stacks of old documents remain scattered across offices and workrooms. Filing cabinets stand open, drawers half pulled out, papers spilling onto floors where dust has settled in soft layers. Desks still hold ledgers, memos, and handwritten notes, their edges curled and yellowed. It feels less like an abandoned factory and more like a workplace waiting for its staff to return. The mill once processed paper for official use. Contracts, shipping records, payroll sheets, and internal correspondence flowed through its offices as steadily as pulp moved through its machines. Accuracy mattered here. Paper was weighed, stamped, approved, and archived. Every sheet carried purpose, and every mark meant something. When the mill closed, the shutdown happened quickly. Production stopped, but the paperwork remained. Files were left where they lay. Documents meant for storage were never boxed. What could not be reused was simply abandoned, page after page left to age in place. Visitors entering the mill today often remark on the smell first. Old paper carries a distinct scent, dry and faintly sweet, mixed with damp air and rust. The soundscape is quiet, broken only by distant drips and the soft creak of the building settling. In rooms with no open windows and no visible airflow, papers rustle on their own. The sound is gentle but unmistakable, like hands flipping through documents just out of sight. A stack shifts slightly, as though adjusted by unseen fingers. Those who stop to listen notice that the rustling follows a pattern. It comes in waves, rising and falling, never frantic, never random. The sound travels from office to office, lingering briefly before moving on. Attempts to explain it often fall short. Air currents are minimal. Floors remain undisturbed. Yet the papers continue to stir, responding to something that cannot be seen. More unsettling are the marks that appear on certain pages. Visitors examining documents sometimes notice faint impressions on the paper, shapes darker than the surrounding surface. At first glance they resemble smudges or stains left by moisture. Then the outlines become clearer. Fingers. Palms. Full handprints pressed flat against the page. The handprints vary in size and position. Some appear centered, as if placed deliberately. Others stretch across margins or overlap text, as though someone reached out mid-task. The marks do not bleed through to other pages. They exist only on the surface, as if formed by pressure alone. The warmth of a fingertip causes the impression to lighten, dissolving gradually until the paper returns to its previous state. Staff members who once worked at the mill described long hours spent reviewing documents late into the evening. Offices stayed lit long after production floors went quiet. Pages were handled constantly, passed from desk to desk, weighed down with paperweights to keep them from shifting. No residue remains. No discoloration lingers. The page appears unchanged, leaving visitors questioning what they saw. According to former employees, paper was never just material. It was responsibility made physical. Mistakes lived on the page. Decisions could not be erased easily. Every hand that touched a document left a trace, if only in memory. Those traces seem to remain. Visitors report that the rustling grows more active when someone spends time reading a document. Pages nearby shift. A corner lifts as if seeking attention. The sound feels responsive, not aggressive, as though the papers recognize being noticed. Some describe the sensation of being observed while standing alone in an office. Not watched by eyes, but by accumulation. By records that remember being held, signed, reviewed, and judged. The weight of unfinished business settles heavily in the air. Local historians note that the mill processed sensitive materials during its final years. Records tied to disputes, closures, and layoffs passed through these rooms. Emotions ran high. Hands shook while signing documents. Others lingered over pages they did not want to release. It is suggested that the intensity of that final period left a deeper impression than the years of routine that came before. Paper absorbed more than ink. It absorbed hesitation, regret, and resolve. Those who witnessed the handprints at night described them as clearer, darker, more defined. They appear suddenly, as if pressed from the other side of the page. The instinct to touch them is strong, and when that contact erases the mark, a strange sense of loss follows. Attempts to photograph the handprints rarely succeed. Images capture only faint shadows or nothing at all. The marks seem to exist only in direct observation, refusing to be preserved. Despite the unease, Paperweight Mill does not feel hostile. There is no sense of threat or urgency. The activity feels deliberate, almost careful. The pages do not tear. The stacks do not collapse. Everything remains organized within disorder. Visitors often leave feeling subdued rather than frightened. The experience lingers quietly, like a memory recalled without invitation. Some report dreaming of endless paperwork, of turning pages that never reach an end. By morning, the mill returns to stillness. Offices look unchanged. Handprints are gone. Sunlight reveals nothing unusual. Yet the sense remains that the documents are not finished with those who enter. That the mill continues to process something invisible, weighing moments instead of paper, recording presence instead of names. Pages rustle without wind. Hands press into paper without form. Records wait patiently, as they always have. In the quiet spaces between sound and stillness, the mill remembers every touch, and it continues to ask, silently, to be read one more time. Boiler Room Mill sits at the edge of an abandoned industrial district, its outer walls cracked and darkened by decades of rain and soot. Most of the building is cold and silent now. Floors are littered with dust and fragments of rusted metal. Windows stand open to the weather, allowing wind to pass freely through empty halls where machines once roared without pause. But deep inside the structure, one area remains different. The boiler room. Visitors notice it before they reach it. The air grows warmer with each step down the corridor leading to the old boilers. The warmth does not fluctuate with weather. In winter, frost coats the rest of the mill, yet the boiler room radiates steady heat. In summer, when the building traps warmth naturally, this room still feels separate, as though its temperature is governed by rules no longer connected to the outside world. The boilers themselves loom against the walls. Massive cylindrical tanks of thick steel, their surfaces pitted and stained. Valves are frozen in place. Gauges sit at zero. Pipes snake overhead and vanish into the ceiling, leading nowhere. Every visible sign suggests long inactivity. Yet the room breathes warmth. The mill's history explains why the boiler room was once the heart of everything. Steam powered nearly every process inside the building. The boilers ran continuously, fed by coal and water, building pressure that drove machines across multiple floors. Workers rotated shifts to monitor gauges, vent excess steam, and keep the system from overheating. Minor mistakes could cause burns or pressure failures. Several incidents were recorded over the years, usually described in short, technical language. A valve failure. A pressure spike. An evacuation that came too late for someone trapped too close. Eventually, the mill shut down. The boilers were drained. Fires extinguished. Systems locked and sealed. Over time, entrances were boarded, then broken open again by weather and trespassers. Everything cooled and decayed. Everything except the boiler room. Explorers who enter the space report another sensation alongside the warmth. The air feels heavy, almost damp, even when the rest of the mill is dry. Breathing becomes uncomfortable without clear reason. Some feel their stomach tighten as if reacting to heat exhaustion, despite mild temperatures. Then the sounds begin. Knocking echoes softly from within the sealed tanks. Not loud impacts, but controlled, rhythmic taps that seem to come from inside the steel. The knocks are irregular. Sometimes a single tap, followed by long silence. Sometimes a short sequence, evenly spaced, then nothing. Those who place a hand on the steel feel no vibration. The sound exists without movement. Standing too long in the boiler room affects people physically. Waves of nausea rise suddenly, then recede. A tightness forms in the chest. Heart rate increases without exertion. Fear arrives not as panic, but as certainty, an unshakable sense that something is wrong in a way that cannot be reasoned away. People describe the urge to leave immediately. Not curiosity-driven retreat, but a deep instinctive pull. Those who ignore it often regret staying. The longer they remain, the stronger the sensations become, until focus narrows and the room feels smaller than it should. Caretakers and engineers have examined the space. They check for gas buildup, chemical residue, and structural hazards. Tests return normal. No leaks are detected. No heat source is identified. Instruments show temperatures slightly above surrounding areas, but nothing dangerous. The knocking persists. Audio recordings capture it faintly, sometimes barely above ambient noise. Analysis reveals no consistent mechanical cause. The timing does not match known patterns of thermal expansion or environmental change. The sealed tanks themselves show no signs of tampering. Welds remain intact. Access points are closed. There is no internal pressure. Nothing inside should be moving. The warmth remains unexplained. The mill's old workers spoke cautiously about the boiler room. Even during operation, it was considered oppressive. Not because of noise or danger alone, but because of how it felt to stand among the tanks, surrounded by pressure that could not be seen. Some refused to linger unless necessary. Others insisted on working in pairs, even when policy did not require it. After the shutdown, those memories sharpened. Locals who entered the mill years later claimed the boiler room felt unchanged, as though it never accepted the end of its purpose. The warmth felt familiar. The atmosphere carried the same weight. Some believe the room absorbed the strain of constant pressure. Years of steam building and releasing, monitored by people who understood how little margin for error existed. Moments of alarm. Rushed decisions. Physical stress and fear embedded into routine. The knocking echoes that pressure. A reminder of containment. A force held behind steel walls, never meant to escape all at once. Visitors who flee the room often stop in the corridor outside, catching their breath. The warmth fades quickly. Nausea eases. Fear loosens its grip. The rest of the mill feels empty again, abandoned and harmless by comparison. Looking back into the boiler room, nothing appears unusual. No steam. No glow. No movement. Just old machinery resting in shadow. Yet those who have heard the knocking cannot forget it. They describe it as patient rather than aggressive. Not a warning, not a plea, but an assertion of presence. A sound that exists because the room remembers what it was built to hold. Boiler room mill continues to decay from the outside in. Rain collapses roofs. Walls crumble. Nature reclaims open spaces. But the boiler room resists that decay, holding on to warmth as if insulated by something deeper than insulation. Inside sealed tanks, unseen surfaces remain untouched. And sometimes, when the room is quiet and someone stands too close for too long, knocking echoes softly through the steel. Followed by a sudden wave of sickness and fear. That drives visitors away, leaving the boiler room alone again with the heat it refuses to release. Screaming vent mill stands at the edge of a windswept plain where open land funnels air directly into its tall concrete frame. The sound begins before anyone reaches the door. When the wind shifts, even slightly, a low moan rolls across the grounds. The tone changes with direction and speed, rising and falling in slow waves. Locals grew used to it years ago, explaining it away as air moving through old systems. The vents line the walls and ceilings, dark openings that disappear into the building's interior. When wind pushes through them, the mill responds with a layered chorus of noise. Some vents hum softly. Others resonate sharply. Together they create a continuous undercurrent that never quite settles. At first, it sounds mechanical. Then the tone shifts. The moan deepens, stretches, then fractures into irregular patterns. For brief moments, the sound resembles something closer to a voice, strained and uneven, carried along the airflow rather than produced by it. Some swear they hear screaming mixed into the noise. Not clear, not sustained, but implied. A sudden rise in pitch. A sharp break in the steady flow. A fleeting shape of sound that feels too deliberate to be random. It vanishes as quickly as it appears. Swallowed back into the vent system. Those who listen closely feel an instinctive urge to step away. The mill does not amplify the sound evenly. Certain hallways catch it and redirect it, making the noise seem to travel alongside visitors. A turn down one corridor causes the tone to follow, shifting position as though adjusting to movement. Voices seem to move through the walls. They are never clear enough to understand. They slide through concrete and steel, distorted by distance and structure. At times, a whisper seems to form near one ear, only to drift away when attention turns toward it. The sensation is intimate and unsettling, as if the building itself is leaning closer. The vents do not behave consistently. A section that was quiet moments earlier can suddenly resonate with force, pushing sound outward in a concentrated burst. Another that was loud falls silent, replaced by a different passage taking over the flow. The mill feels alive in these moments, responding dynamically to the air around it. Former engineers explain that the ventilation system was extensive, connecting nearly every part of the structure. Air pressure could move freely, creating feedback loops and resonance chambers. In theory, this explains the complexity of the sound. In practice, it does not explain the voices. Those who have spent extended time inside report patterns. The sounds intensify when the wind changes direction abruptly. They sharpen during storms. They soften during long steady breezes. On completely still days, the mill falls nearly silent, as if holding something back. The wind returns, and the mill exhales again. At night, the experience grows heavier. Without daylight, the vents become unseen mouths in the darkness. Sound travels farther, clearer, without visual grounding. The low moaning stretches longer, echoing down empty halls. Sudden high-pitched shrieks tear briefly through the air before dissolving back into the hum. The first instinct is to locate the source. People move closer to vents, press ears near concrete, try to identify direction. The sound resists this. It never comes from the vent being observed. It emerges from another, just out of reach. Voices slide through walls rather than around them. A phrase almost forms, then breaks apart. A cry rises halfway, then flattens into airflow. The building never allows a sound to complete itself. Everything is carried forward, reshaped, unfinished. Security teams once attempted overnight monitoring. They placed recorders near vents, motion sensors along corridors. Playback revealed only wind and vibration. In person, the experience was unmistakable. The difference unsettled them more than the sounds themselves. Some began to notice physical reactions. Tightness in the chest. Shallow breathing. A sense of pressure building in enclosed spaces. The mill seemed to demand attention, pulling focus toward sound at the expense of everything else. Local stories offer explanations that are quieter. They say the mill worked under constant strain, that pressure built up day and night, released only through its vents. That pressure built up day and night, released only through its vents. They believe the building learned how to express that strain, using air as its voice. The screaming, they say, is not pain, but release. Others believe the walls themselves carry echoes of human presence. Conversations shouted over machinery. Warnings lost in noise. Emotions compressed into moments that never found resolution. The vents simply give those moments a path outward. No records confirm any tragedy tied directly to the mill. There are no official incidents to explain the intensity of the sounds. Yet the experience remains consistent across time and witnesses. They struggle to describe what they heard. The sense that the mill was not just noisy, but expressive. Trees sway. Grass moves. Sound behaves normally. Looking back, screaming vent mill stands silent until the wind shifts once more. Then the moan begins, rising from deep within its structure, shaped by vents designed to carry air, now carrying something more ambiguous. The voices do not ask for attention. They do not demand understanding. They move with the wind, traveling through walls, following pressure and passage rather than people. As long as air flows through the mill, the sound will continue to change shape. Low moans. Sudden cries. Whispers without words. A reminder that some buildings do not simply hold space. They breathe. Rusted Ladder Mill stands on the edge of a forgotten industrial yard, its brick walls darkened by time and weather. Tall windows stare outward like empty frames, and machinery once hummed. From the outside, the mill feels still, as if its work ended long ago and nothing more remains. Inside, attention is drawn upward. And when the wind finds the right angle, screaming vent mill gives voice to everything it has ever contained, releasing it slowly, endlessly, through walls built to let nothing escape. A single ladder runs along the inner wall, stretching from the ground floor to a shadowed platform above. Its metal rungs are deeply corroded, flaking rust falling away at the slightest disturbance. The ladder has been sealed off for safety, yet it remains where it always was, fixed in place like a spine running through the building. Decades ago, this ladder failed. Records describe a routine shift, ordinary and uneventful. A worker climbed the ladder to reach the upper platform, as he had countless times before. The metal, weakened by years of moisture and chemical exposure, gave way without warning. The collapse was sudden. The sound echoed through the mill. By the time others reached the ladder, it was already too late. Operations continued briefly after the incident. Repairs were made elsewhere, but the ladder was never replaced. Management chose instead to block access to the upper levels, sealing off the platform entirely. Eventually, the mill closed for unrelated reasons, leaving the ladder behind as it was on the day everything changed. Visitors entering Rusted Ladder Mill today feel an immediate unease. The air is cool and heavy, carrying the smell of old iron and dust. Sound travels upward easily, bouncing between walls and beams. Even a small noise seems to climb the space, drawing the eye toward the ladder and the dark platform above. It is here that the sounds begin. Soft metallic taps echo faintly through the mill. At first, they are easy to dismiss. Wind-shifting debris. But the pattern soon becomes clear. The sound resembles footsteps on rungs. Slow, deliberate climbing, one step at a time. Visitors pause to listen. The sound continues upward, then stops. After a brief silence, it resumes, sometimes starting lower, sometimes higher. It never reaches the top platform. It never descends. It simply climbs, over and over, repeating the same careful rhythm. Standing near the ladder intensifies the experience. People report feeling a faint vibration through the metal rails. Barely noticeable at first, like the hum of distant machinery. Placing a hand near the ladder reveals a subtle trembling, as if weight is being applied and released. The ladder is untouched. No air currents explain the motion. No nearby equipment is running. The ladder is bolted firmly to the wall, incapable of movement under normal conditions. Yet the vibration returns repeatedly, strongest during moments when the climbing sounds are heard most clearly. Those who climb the stairs to view the ladder from above report a heightened sense of pressure. Looking down, the floor seems farther away than expected. Depth feels exaggerated. The ladder stretches below, its rusted rungs catching light unevenly. Some describe the sensation that someone is climbing toward them, just out of sight. Maintenance crews tasked with monitoring the structure avoid standing directly beside the ladder. They acknowledge the sounds but offer practical explanations. Metal expands and contracts. Buildings settle. Old structures produce unexpected noises. Their words are calm, yet their behavior suggests caution. No one touches the ladder longer than necessary. Historical notes on the mill reveal the ladder was heavily used. The upper platform housed monitoring equipment that required frequent checks. Workers climbed the ladder multiple times per shift, often carrying tools. Over time, the ladder became a focal point of routine. Its use was constant, its presence unavoidable. The worker who fell was known for reliability. Accounts describe him as careful, experienced, and methodical. The collapse was not blamed on error, but on unseen weakness. The ladder appeared sound until the moment it failed. Visitors often report dreams after leaving the mill. They dream of climbing without reaching the top. Of rungs that feel unstable beneath their hands. Of movement upward accompanied by the certainty that something is wrong. The dreams end abruptly, leaving behind a lingering tension. Back inside the mill, the ladder remains the center of attention. Light filtering through broken windows creates shifting patterns along its length. Shadows stretch and compress as clouds pass overhead. At times, the ladder appears to sway slightly, though focusing on it reveals nothing unusual. The climbing sounds tend to occur when the mill is quiet. Voices stop. Footsteps fade. In that stillness, the metal taps return, clear and unmistakable. Some visitors attempt to count the rungs by sound, only to lose track as the rhythm changes unexpectedly. The vibration always follows. It begins near the base, then travels upward, as if something is ascending rung by rung. The sensation dissipates near the sealed platform, never crossing into the space beyond. Leaving the mill brings a sense of release. Outside, the air feels lighter. Sounds return to normal scale. Looking back, the ladder is barely visible through the dark interior, just another rusted structure in an abandoned building. Yet the memory persists. Those who experienced the sounds and vibrations often describe a feeling of unfinished motion. As if the act of climbing was interrupted and never completed. The ladder remains in place, bearing the imprint of repeated use, frozen in a moment that never resolved. Rusted ladder mill no longer serves its original purpose. Its machines are silent. Its floors gather dust. But the ladder remains, fixed against the wall, quietly active in ways that defy explanation. Visitors leave with the sense that the mill remembers what happened here. That it remembers the weight on each rung. And that in the quiet, when no one is watching, the ladder still answers that memory. Vibrating softly as invisible footsteps climb. Rung by rung, toward a platform that remains forever out of reach. The mill once operated around the clock. Paper rolled endlessly through its corridors, guided by conveyor belts that never seemed to stop. The rhythm of production defined the place. Belts hummed. Rollers turned. Sheets moved forward in steady motion, measured and precise. When the mill finally closed, that rhythm was supposed to end. It did not. Locals first noticed the sounds after midnight. A low mechanical murmur drifted from the building, subtle enough to be ignored at first. Over time, the sound became more distinct. The unmistakable roll of paper moving across metal surfaces echoed through the structure, slow and deliberate. Those who approached the mill at night reported the same thing. Conveyor belts inside were moving. From outside, the motion could sometimes be seen through broken windows. Dark shapes slid past one another in the shadows, looping and turning as they once did during operation. No lights were on. No power lines connected the building. Yet the belts moved with familiar purpose. The sound carried far in the still night air. Paper rolled over rollers in long, continuous sheets. The noise was not chaotic or broken. It followed the old cadence of production, as if a night shift had returned without workers. Inside the mill, the experience was more intense. Entering after dark, visitors described hearing the belts before seeing them. The sound guided movement through hallways and past silent machines. The air felt active, charged by motion that should not exist. Floors vibrated faintly underfoot, subtle enough to feel imagined until attention settled on it. Some carried nothing. Others seemed to support the faint impression of material, suggested only by sound. No motors were running. No switches were engaged. Control panels remained dark and lifeless. The most unsettling detail came when visitors brought light into the space. Turning on a flashlight or portable lamp caused everything to stop instantly. The belts froze mid-motion. The sound of rolling paper cut off without echo or delay. Vibration vanished. Silence rushed in, heavy and complete, as though the mill itself had inhaled and held breath. There was no slowing, no gradual halt. Motion simply ceased. Lights revealed what should have been there all along. Belts hung slack or rested motionless on rollers. Dust lay undisturbed. No paper was present. No sign of recent movement could be found. The machinery appeared exactly as it had during the day. When the lights were turned off again, the pause lingered. For several seconds, nothing happened. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the sound returned. A faint rustle at first, followed by the familiar roll. Belts resumed movement as if uninterrupted, continuing from where they had been stopped. This pattern repeated consistently. Darkness allowed motion. Light ended it. Attempts to record the phenomenon produced mixed results. Audio equipment captured the rolling sound clearly, but video often failed to show belt movement unless filmed in near darkness. Audio equipment captured the rolling sound clearly, but video often failed to show belt movement unless filmed in near darkness. Infrared cameras recorded inconsistent images, blurring motion into indistinct shapes. The evidence remained frustratingly incomplete. The mill's history offers possible clues but no answers. It specialized in large-scale paper processing, operating massive conveyor systems designed for continuous use. Shutdown procedures were complex and gradual. Emergency stops were rare, reserved only for critical failures. Longtime workers spoke of the mill as a place that never truly slept. Even during maintenance pauses, machinery ticked and settled, cooling and adjusting. Silence was unfamiliar. When the closure came, it was sudden. Orders ended. Production halted. Workers cleared out in days, not months. Some equipment was left in place, expected to be dismantled later. That never happened. Those who once worked there describe an odd sense of recognition when hearing the night sounds. The rhythm matches memory too closely to dismiss. It feels like a routine resuming rather than an anomaly starting. Despite the activity, no one reports feeling threatened inside the mill. The motion does not approach or react. It continues its work regardless of presence. The only response comes when light is introduced, as if the process requires darkness to exist. The sound of rolling paper carries emotion without intention. For some, it brings nostalgia. For others, unease. The mill feels occupied, not by people, but by function. Leaving the building at night does not stop the activity. The sound continues behind closed doors, echoing faintly through broken windows. From a distance, the mill appears unchanged, dark and silent, hiding its motion within. At dawn, everything is still again. Entering in daylight reveals nothing unusual. Belts rest where they should. Dust remains settled. The mill returns to its abandoned state, offering no hint of the night before. Those who have witnessed the movement describe a lingering impression that the mill did not accept closure in the way people expected. Midnight conveyor mill does not perform for attention. It does not escalate or vary its behavior. It simply resumes what it once did best, quietly and without supervision, as long as darkness allows. The instant lights come on, the illusion ends. Silence returns. The mill obeys the rules of abandonment once more. Until the next night falls. Then, deep inside the structure, belts begin to move again. Paper rolls through empty corridors. Production continues without workers, without power, without explanation. The mill waits for darkness, and when it arrives, it remembers exactly how to work. Watchman's mill stands at the far edge of an industrial yard where grass has pushed through cracked pavement and rust stains mark the walls like long shadows. The building is tall and narrow, designed for function rather than comfort, with long corridors and stairwells that amplify every sound. During the day it feels empty and still. At night, it feels occupied. For many years, a single night watchman lived on site. His job was simple and relentless. He patrolled the mill after dark, checking doors, inspecting machinery, and ensuring that nothing moved where it should not. While others worked in shifts and returned home, the watchman remained. A small room near the entrance served as both office and living space. His life followed the miller's rhythm. Records describe him as dependable and quiet. He rarely took time off. Logs show regular entries noting completed patrols and uneventful nights. Over time, co-workers grew accustomed to his presence, greeting him in passing but never lingering. When the mill slowed and then closed, the watchman stayed on to guard what remained. He died alone inside the building. Details are sparse. The passing was not dramatic, not discovered immediately. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the mill had already grown quiet around him. Official reports closed the matter quickly. The mill itself was sealed soon after. That should have been the end of the story. Visitors who enter Watchman's mill after dark report the same experience. Footsteps begin echoing through the corridors, slow and deliberate. The footsteps move with purpose, tracing familiar paths along the main floor and up the stairwells. The steps pause at intersections, then continue, as if following a well-practiced route. Those who listen carefully notice that the footsteps never overlap with their own. When visitors stop, the sound continues elsewhere. The sound carries clearly through the mill. Concrete floors amplify each step. Metal railings vibrate softly. The footsteps feel heavy, consistent with boots worn by someone accustomed to long hours of walking. Alongside the footsteps, another detail appears. A beam of light sweeps across walls and ceilings. It moves steadily, cutting through darkness in a narrow arc, illuminating peeling paint and old warning signs before sliding away again. The light behaves like a handheld flashlight, controlled and focused, never erratic. It pauses briefly on doorways and corners, then moves on. Those who see it assume another person is exploring the mill. They call out. The light vanishes. When they round the corner, the corridor is empty, swallowed by shadow. Security teams once investigated reports of trespassers. Motion sensors were installed and later removed after repeated false alarms. Cameras captured nothing beyond shifting light and shadow. The power supply remained disconnected, yet the beam appeared regardless, bright enough to reveal details clearly. Former employees say the watchman always carried a flashlight. Even in well-lit areas, he preferred to rely on its beam, scanning carefully as he walked. It was part of his routine, a habit formed over years of solitary patrols. That routine seems to continue. Visitors report that the flashlight beam appears most often along the same paths recorded in old patrol logs. The light never enters the watchman's old room. It passes by the doorway and continues on. At times, the footsteps and the light align perfectly. The beam moves in rhythm with the steps, stopping when they stop, turning when they turn. The effect is deeply unsettling, not because it feels threatening, but because it feels purposeful. Those who attempt to follow the light never succeed. It always retreats just beyond reach, slipping into stairwells or around corners that lead only to empty space. When visitors give up and stand still, the patrol resumes elsewhere, as if the presence has decided its position is secure. Local residents are not surprised by the stories. They say the watchman took his job seriously. That he believed in guarding the mill even after its value faded. According to them, his sense of duty did not end with his life. Psychological explanations are offered. Isolation heightens awareness. Old buildings carry sound unpredictably. Light reflects strangely off glass and metal. Each explanation holds some truth, yet none account for the precision of the movement or the consistency of reports across years. At night, the mill feels different. The air grows heavy. Standing alone in the dark, visitors often feel as though they are being monitored, not judged, but accounted for. Some describe a moment of strange reassurance when they realize the footsteps follow a set route. The patrol feels orderly. Predictable. As long as the watch continues, the mill feels contained, protected from complete collapse into silence. Others feel compelled to leave. The sense of being observed becomes too strong. They exit quickly, glancing back to see the flashlight beam sweep once more across the wall behind them, as if confirming their departure. By morning, the mill returns to stillness. Sunlight reveals empty corridors and dust-covered floors. No signs of activity remain. Yet the memory of the night lingers, sharper than expected. Watchman's Mill remains closed, its future uncertain. It stands as a structure without purpose, guarded by someone who never learned how to stop. After dark, footsteps continue their patrol. Doors remain closed. Corners are checked. The watch goes on, steady and patient. In the quiet hours when no one is meant to be there, the mill is not abandoned. It is being watched. Collapsed Wing Mill stands beside a frozen river where winter still seems to linger longer than it should. The structure is fractured, its eastern wing torn open and folded inward as if pressed down by an invisible weight. Stone walls that once rose straight now lean at uneasy angles. Broken beams jut outward, locked in place since the night the storm came through and changed everything. Before the collapse, the mill was already struggling. Production slowed as winters grew harsher. Snow packed against the outer walls, and ice crept into cracks that had been ignored for years. Workers reported strange drafts and shifting floors, but operations continued. Repairs were postponed. The mill could not afford another pause. The storm arrived without warning. Wind howled through the valley, carrying snow dense enough to erase distance. Roof support strained under the weight. By nightfall, part of the eastern wing gave way. The collapse echoed across the frozen river, sending stone and timber crashing inward. Rescue efforts were delayed by weather. Snow blocked roads. Ice made access dangerous. By the time crews reached the site, much of the wing had settled into a compressed mass of debris. Survivors were pulled from shallow pockets near the edge. The mill never reopened. What remains now is silent from the outside. Inside, the atmosphere changes immediately. Visitors who stepped through broken doorways describe the air as thick and resistant, as though breathing requires effort. Even in open sections, the sensation persists. The collapsed wing amplifies this effect. As explorers approach the rubble, sound dulls. Footsteps lose clarity. Voices feel absorbed rather than echoed. Dust hangs unmoving in the air, disturbed only briefly before settling again. Then come the voices. They are faint at first, easily mistaken for wind slipping through broken stone. A drawn-out sound that could be anything. As listeners remain still, the noise gains shape. Calls for help. Not shouted. Not frantic. Low and strained, as if spoken by someone conserving energy. The voices come from beneath the collapsed wing, deep within the rubble where no open space should exist. They do not repeat the same words. Sometimes it is a single phrase, broken by pauses. Other times it is a name, spoken quietly, followed by silence. The tone carries exhaustion rather than panic, making it difficult to dismiss as imagination. Those who call out receive no reply. The voices do not answer questions. They continue briefly, then fade as if the effort required too much strength. Explorers often feel torn. Instinct demands action, movement toward the sound. Reason insists the space is unsafe, unstable, long abandoned. Those who move closer report the air growing heavier, their thoughts slowing, fear rising without clear cause. The rubble itself appears unchanged. No stones shift. No dust falls. The voices exist without visible disturbance, detached from physical movement. Local historians attribute the phenomenon to acoustics. Collapsed spaces create unusual sound pathways. Wind passing through fractured chambers can produce human-like tones. The mind fills in details, especially when aware of past tragedy. But this explanation falters when visitors hear the voices in still air. On days without wind. In moments of complete silence. The calls arrive without environmental trigger, carrying the same subdued urgency every time. The Milla-S records confirm that workers were trapped during the collapse. How many remains uncertain. Some names appear in payroll logs without follow-up notes. Others are mentioned only once in personal letters. The official report focused on structural failure, not loss. Over time, the story faded. The river froze and thawed. Snow buried the ruins each winter, then retreated. Nature softened edges but did not erase the damage. Inside the mill, the oppressive air remains constant. Those who linger too long near the collapsed wing report dizziness and nausea. The pressure feels internal rather than environmental, as though the body is reacting to a situation it cannot escape. Some describe a sense of being pulled downward. Not physically, but mentally. Thoughts drift toward the rubble. The outside world feels distant and irrelevant. People who leave the space report immediate relief. Breathing becomes easier. Sound returns to normal. The weight lifts abruptly, leaving behind only lingering unease and unanswered questions. The voices do not follow. They remain beneath the collapsed wing, bound to the space where stone and timber sealed off light and movement. Repeated visits yield the same experience. The air grows heavy. The calls emerge. Silence follows. The pattern does not change, as if replayed rather than active. No one has ever uncovered the source. Digging into the rubble is unsafe and discouraged. Structural engineers warn that disturbing the debris could trigger further collapse. The wing remains untouched, a frozen moment of failure preserved by necessity. Collapsed wing mill has become a place of quiet avoidance. Locals pass by without stopping. Explorers speak in subdued tones. Those who have heard the voices rarely return, not out of fear, but out of respect. The mill does not feel hostile. It feels burdened. As if the weight of the collapse never settled completely, lingering instead in the air and stone. The voices beneath the rubble do not accuse or demand. They simply exist, calling softly into a space that no longer leads anywhere. Winter returns each year, coating the ruins in snow. The river freezes. Wind moves through broken beams. Inside, the air remains heavy. And beneath the collapsed wing, where the storm ended and the walls fell inward, voices still rise quietly from beneath the rubble, calling for help that will never arrive, echoing through a space that has learned how to hold sound, pressure, and memory all at once. Ashroom Mill stands silent beside a narrow service road, its outer walls stained by decades of weather and neglect. From the outside, the structure looks much like other abandoned industrial sites. Broken windows. Rusted doors. Faded warning signs. But inside, one section feels profoundly different. This part of the mill was damaged by fire shortly before operations ended. Records describe a contained incident, intense but brief, isolated to a single processing chamber. No full collapse. No dramatic destruction. The mill was already nearing closure, and repairs were never completed. When the gates were locked for the last time, the ash room was left exactly as it was. Soot still coats the walls. It lies thick and uneven, clinging to concrete, steel beams, and the remains of machinery. Even after years of exposure, the black residue does not fade. Touching the surface leaves dark traces on skin and clothing, as though the fire never truly cooled. The air inside carries a dry, bitter scent that does not dissipate, a smell not quite smoke, not quite dust. Light behaves strangely here. Sunlight enters through high windows and fractured panels, but instead of spreading evenly, it breaks into thin, wavering bands. These bands slide across the soot-covered surfaces, stretching and contracting as if caught in motion. At first glance, it looks like a trick of dust or reflection. Then the shadows begin to flicker. They move quickly, irregularly, darting along walls and across the floor. The motion resembles firelight, the restless dance of flames licking upward, though no source exists. The shadows brighten and dim in rapid pulses, responding to nothing visible. Visitors often stop without realizing it, drawn into watching the movement. The shadows do not remain confined to one place. They travel along surfaces, climbing vertical supports, slipping behind equipment, gathering briefly in corners before scattering again. The effect is strongest in the deepest part of the room, where soot is thickest and light is weakest. Those who linger report a sense of warmth that comes and goes. It is subtle, localized, a brief flush of heat against the face or hands, followed by an immediate return to cold. Instruments show no temperature change. The sensation feels internal, triggered by proximity rather than environment. The fire that damaged this room was extinguished long ago, yet the space behaves as though it remembers burning. Former workers who have returned speak quietly about the ash room. They recall the night of the incident, the alarms, the sudden brightness, the urgency. But more than that, they remember the aftermath. The silence that followed. The decision to leave the room sealed, untouched. They say the mill changed after that. Production continued briefly, but the rhythm felt broken. Machines elsewhere seemed louder. Shadows felt deeper. When the mill finally closed, the ash room was never cleaned. Over time, visitors noticed another detail. The shadows do not always match the available light. They flicker even when clouds do not move. They surge when nothing changes. At times, they appear to react to presence. People stepping into the room often notice the flickering intensify. The shadows sharpen, edges becoming more defined, movement faster. Stepping back causes the motion to slow again, settling into a lower, steadier rhythm. Some describe the feeling of standing beside an active fire without flame or heat, aware of energy without seeing its source. Sound behaves oddly as well. Footsteps echo longer than expected, reverberating off soot-coated walls in soft, muffled tones. A cough or spoken word seems absorbed rather than reflected, as though the room is swallowing sound. Not everyone hears it. Those who do often struggle to explain it clearly. It does not resemble wood burning or metal shifting. It is closer to the sound of something settling, minute and continuous. Investigators have offered explanations. They point to residual soot creating uneven light absorption. To particulate matter suspended in air. To psychological suggestion in a space marked by damage. These explanations address parts of the experience but fail to capture the whole. What makes the ash room distinct is consistency. Different visitors, at different times, describe nearly identical impressions. The flickering shadows. The false warmth. The sense that the room is active rather than abandoned. None report fear exactly. Instead, they describe attention. The room feels alert. Some believe the fire never truly ended here. Not physically, but conceptually. They say the energy of the event remains embedded in the space, replaying itself endlessly in light and shadow. The soot acts as a canvas, revealing motion that would otherwise remain unseen. Others believe the room holds memory. That intense moments leave impressions, and this one was never allowed to resolve. The fire was stopped, but the process was not completed. No restoration. No closure. The space was frozen at the moment just after destruction. At certain times of day, especially late afternoon, the effect becomes strongest. As sunlight lowers and angles sharpen, shadows stretch longer. The room appears almost alive, breathing in light and releasing motion. Visitors often feel reluctant to leave during these moments. It takes effort to turn away, to step back into hallways where light behaves normally. Outside the ash room, the mill feels quiet and empty again. No flickering shadows. No strange warmth. Just decay and silence. The contrast is immediate and unsettling. Security patrols avoid the area after dark. Not because of danger, but because the room becomes harder to ignore. The room becomes harder to ignore. Shadows move faster without daylight, responding to artificial light with exaggerated motion. The effect feels more intimate, closer. Despite this, the ash room mill remains standing, its doors closed, its interior slowly aging. No restoration efforts are planned. No demolition scheduled. The building exists in limbo, much like the room itself. Those who have stood inside the ash room often describe a lasting impression. A memory of movement without flame. Of heat without source. Of watching something that should be gone continue to express itself. They say the room does not threaten. It does not warn. It simply repeats. As long as soot remains on the walls, and light finds its way inside, the shadows will continue to flicker. Not as fire, but as the echo of fire, moving across surfaces as if the flames never truly stopped burning, only learned how to hide in the dark. River intake mill stands beside a slow-moving bend of water that appears calm from the surface. The building is broad and low, constructed to harness the river without drawing attention to itself. Stone walls meet the current directly, and iron grates mark the openings where water disappears beneath the structure. From above, the river looks ordinary. Beneath the mill lies a network of intake tunnels. These tunnels were carved to guide water inward, feeding turbines and channels hidden from view. They descend sharply and curve away from the light, swallowing sound and reflection alike. Even during the day, the openings appear pitch black. Flashlights reveal only a few feet before darkness closes again, thick and complete. Workers once entered these tunnels for inspections. They recorded the experience as disorienting and unpleasant. Sound behaved strangely underground. Water amplified every noise, sending echoes back along the stone walls. Voices carried farther than expected, returning softened and delayed. Over time, fewer workers volunteered for tunnel duty. The darkness felt too heavy. The silence too deep. When the mill was active, voices were heard rising from below. At first, they were assumed to be echoes of workers calling out to one another. Shouts traveled upward through vents and shafts, distorted by distance and flow. But even when no one was assigned underground, the voices continued. Soft murmurs drifting upward, unintelligible but persistent. These sounds were never loud. They hovered just beneath the threshold of understanding, like words spoken through water. Standing near the intake grates, workers felt the urge to lean closer, to listen more carefully. Supervisors warned against lingering. Focus was required. Distraction near open water was dangerous. After the mill closed, the voices did not stop. Visitors approaching the intake openings today report hearing faint sounds rising from below. The river itself masks much of the noise, but in quiet moments, the echoes return. A distant cadence that suggests speech without clarity. The sound seems to respond to presence, growing more noticeable when someone stands directly above the tunnels. Those who listen too long describe a strange physical sensation. A gentle pull toward the edge. Not sudden, not forceful, but steady. The body shifts forward almost without awareness. Feet inch closer to the grates. Hands reach for railings instinctively. The sensation disappears the moment attention breaks. People step back, unsettled by how natural the movement felt. The pull does not come from the water's surface. The river flows steadily, with no visible current strong enough to draw anyone in. Instead, the sensation seems to rise from below, aligned with the dark openings that lead into the tunnels. Maintenance crews tasked with sealing parts of the intake system experienced similar effects. They speak of needing to anchor themselves mentally as much as physically. Of feeling their balance adjust without reason. Of catching themselves leaning forward, focused on the sound beneath their feet rather than their footing. The tunnels themselves remain inaccessible. Collapsed sections and standing water prevent exploration beyond the entrance. Cameras lowered into the openings capture nothing but darkness. Audio equipment records only water movement and faint ambient noise. The voices heard by those above never appear clearly in recordings. Historical documents hint at the mill's troubled relationship with the river. During its early years, intake levels were adjusted frequently to accommodate seasonal changes. Sudden surges forced emergency shutdowns. Water pressure fluctuated unpredictably. Workers learned to listen closely to the sound of the tunnels, using changes in echo to judge conditions below. Listening became a survival skill. Those who could interpret the echoes avoided accidents. Those who could not were reassigned. Over time, attention to the tunnels grew intense. The darkness demanded awareness. The river below shaped behavior above. Some historians believe the mill's design amplified natural acoustics. Sound traveling upward through curved stone passages can distort and overlap, creating the impression of voices. Combined with low-frequency vibrations from moving water, the effect may influence balance and perception. It does not explain why the pull feels intentional. Visitors often describe the sensation as directional, focused toward the center of the intake rather than the water as a whole. Standing only a few steps back removes the feeling entirely. Stepping forward brings it back, subtle but undeniable. At night, the effect strengthens. Without daylight reflecting off the river, the intake openings become voids in the ground. Darkness appears thicker, more absolute. The voices seem closer now, less distant. Some describe hearing individual tones rather than blended sound. Not words, but intention. The body responds before thought intervenes. Muscles tense. Breath shortens. A sense of urgency rises, unconnected to fear. It feels like a request rather than a threat. Those who step away report immediate relief. The sensation breaks cleanly, leaving behind confusion and doubt. Looking back at the intake, nothing appears different. Water flows. The grates remain still. The darkness waits. Former employees of River Intake Mill rarely discuss the tunnels. When they do, their language is careful. They describe respect for the river. For the space beneath the mill. For the need to remain aware of where one stands. Even long after the work ended. They emphasize discipline and focus. Some admit they still dream of the sound. A low echo rising through stone. A feeling of leaning forward without deciding to move. Waking comes with the sensation of pulling back from a ledge. Today, River Intake Mill remains quiet above ground. Its machinery is silent. Its floors gather dust. Yet the river continues its work below, flowing through channels carved to guide it. The intake tunnels remain open, dark, and active. Visitors who approach the edge feel it again. The voices rising softly from the depths. The subtle pull toward the black openings. The sense that attention is being drawn downward, not by force, but by familiarity. River Intake Mill does not demand anything. The water moves beneath it, carrying sound and pressure through unseen paths. And for those who stand too close and listen too carefully, the boundary between observation and movement grows thin. Reminding them that some places are shaped not just to receive water, but to draw focus, balance, and intention toward the dark spaces below. Last Run Mill stands at the edge of a river bend where industry once defined the horizon. Its tall stacks and wide loading bays rise above water that still moves patiently past stone foundations. Rust stains trail down concrete walls. Windows reflect sky and current with equal indifference. During the day, the mill appears finished with its purpose, a silent monument to a chapter that closed. This was the final paper mill to shut down in the region. For decades, it outlasted the others. When nearby mills went dark, Last Run continued operating, its machines older but dependable, its crews experienced and loyal. It carried contracts that no one else could fulfill and held on to routines long after the industry began to thin. The closure did not come suddenly. It arrived slowly, announced in meetings and notices, delayed more than once, until the final shift ended and the gates were locked. The last run of paper was completed quietly. Machines were powered down in sequence. Belts slowed. Rollers coasted to a stop. Workers stood and listened as the familiar noise faded. Marking an ending that felt heavier than expected. When the doors closed behind them, the region lost its final industrial heartbeat. Nights near the river are calm now. Traffic is distant. Wind moves gently through reeds and trees. It is during these quiet hours that something returns. On certain nights, the sound of machinery starting up fills the air. It begins faintly, barely more than a suggestion. A low hum rises from the direction of the mill, followed by deeper tones that resemble motors engaging. The noise builds gradually, layer by layer, as if different sections are coming online. Pumps thrum. Gears catch. Conveyors engage. The mill does not roar. It resumes with restraint, like a veteran worker returning to routine. From outside, lights remain off. No movement is visible through windows. Yet the sound carries clearly across water and open ground. It echoes with enough clarity to make denial difficult. Visitors who approach the mill during these moments feel a shift almost immediately. The closer they come, the stronger the sensation becomes. It starts as alertness, then sharpens into urgency. The body reacts before thought can catch up. Those who stay too long feel an overwhelming urge to leave immediately. The feeling is sudden and intense. It does not arrive as fear or panic. It feels practical and undeniable, like an internal alarm triggered without explanation. Muscles tense. Breathing quickens. Focus narrows to one simple directive. Leave now. People report looking at doors and pathways instinctively, mapping the fastest route away. The urge does not allow hesitation. It does not encourage investigation. It insists on distance, immediate and decisive. Those who ignore the feeling describe growing discomfort. The machinery sound seems closer, louder, though nothing visible changes. Vibrations may be felt underfoot, subtle but persistent. The air feels charged, heavy with anticipation. Staying longer does not reveal more. It only intensifies the need to go. Once visitors step away from the mill grounds, the sensation eases quickly. Breathing steadies. Muscles relax. Looking back, the building appears unchanged, dark and still against the river. The sound often stops soon after. Those who remain at a distance sometimes hear the machinery wind down. Motors disengage. Systems quiet. The mill returns to silence as smoothly as it resumed activity. By morning, nothing suggests the night disturbance occurred. Inside the mill, daylight reveals only abandonment. Dust coats surfaces. Control panels remain dark. Switches are locked in off positions. There is no power source capable of running the machines. No evidence of recent use can be found. Attempts to capture the sounds yield mixed results. Audio recordings sometimes pick up low mechanical tones, but clarity is inconsistent. Video shows no motion. The history of Last Run Mill offers context but no explanation. This place was built for continuous operation. Machines were designed to start in sequence, each dependent on the last. Shutdown procedures were carefully managed to avoid damage. The mill was never meant to stop abruptly. When closure finally came, some workers described it as unfinished, not emotionally, but mechanically. The idea that the mill could simply end felt wrong. It had always resumed after downtime. Always restarted after maintenance. For those who worked here, the noise feels accurate, precise, and deeply familiar. Yet the urgent need to leave suggests something else. The mill does not invite presence. It does not welcome witnesses. Whatever resumes at night does not intend to be observed. Some believe the building reacts to quiet. When the surrounding world falls still enough. The mill fills the silence with what it knows best. Others suggest that the sound is not the machines themselves, but an echo of routine replaying in the absence of interruption. The urge to leave remains the most consistent element. It feels protective rather than threatening, as if the place enforces a boundary. You may hear, but you may not stay. Over time, the reports have not escalated. There are no lights, no movement, no escalation in intensity. The mill behaves with restraint, repeating the same pattern without variation. Last Run Mill stands as the final echo of an industry that defined the region. By day, it is quiet and inert. By night, it remembers how to begin. Those who hear the startup understand instinctively that the moment is not meant for them. The machinery awakens, and the body responds with certainty. This was the last mill to close. It may also be the last one that truly learned how to stop. When the sound rises and the urge comes, the safest choice is simple. Leave immediately. Let the mill complete its unseen run alone. And carry the quiet back with you. Before the river and walls decide to hold you a moment longer. Thank you for walking through the haunted abandoned paper mills of Wisconsin with me tonight. These buildings once fueled progress, jobs, and entire communities. But they also absorbed pain, exhaustion, and lives lost to machines that never stopped. When the mills were abandoned, the walls remained. The floors remembered. And something else stayed behind, pacing the halls where workers once rushed to meet the next shift. Some who visit these places leave with stories they cannot explain. Some leave with fear that follows them home. And some swear they still hear machinery in their dreams, grinding endlessly in the dark. If you ever pass an abandoned paper mill along a quiet Wisconsin road, do not linger too long. Listen carefully. The building may be waiting for someone to clock back in. Would you dare explore one of these mills alone after midnight? Or would you turn away before the doors close behind you? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.